I left a life of chaos and gunfire for the quiet mountains, becoming a park ranger with my loyal dog, Koda. But some shadows never truly disappear. One radio call pulled me back into a world of betrayal and brutal vengeance, costing me everything. Subscribe to find out what happens next. If you've ever felt the call of the wild, the quiet hum of a forest at dawn, or the unspoken understanding with a loyal companion, then you know a piece of my world. My name is Alex. Most days, you'll find me deep in the heart of West Virginia, a U.S. park ranger, walking trails with Koda, my German shepherd, and ensuring these ancient mountains stay just as they're meant to be. This channel, it's about that life, about the quiet strength we find, the wounds we carry, and the healing we seek. If that speaks to your soul, consider joining our little community by hitting that subscribe button. It helps us share these stories that sometimes, like the dense fog rolling down these valleys, conceal truths you never expected. For years, I believed I'd outrun the shadows of my past. The crackle of a two-way radio used to mean a different kind of urgency, a different kind of fight. Now, it was just about a lost hiker or a fallen tree. And Koda, he was my constant, an anchor in the quiet solitude. 5 years old, a magnificent German shepherd, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, a deep rumble in his chest that was both warning and comfort. He'd lay his muzzle on my knee, heavy and reassuring, sensing every ripple in my calm facade. But beneath that tranquility, a different kind of storm was always brewing, a memory of a life I'd tried to leave behind, a life of relentless pursuit and hard, unyielding choices. It turns out, some storms just lie dormant, waiting for the right conditions to gather and break. One evening, a little over a month ago, the radio squawked with a frequency I hadn't heard in years. It was an old call sign, a ghost from my previous life, pulling me back into the world of concrete and gunfire I'd sworn off. A heavily armed crew had stormed a downtown bank, not firing a shot yet, but leaving a trail of pure destruction. This wasn't some backwoods moonshine bust. This was orchestrated chaos. My old task force, the one I'd led before seeking refuge in these mountains, was being mobilized. I still had the contacts, the skills, the instincts, and they needed them. I remember the drive in, the city lights a jarring contrast to the starlight I was used to. Koda was with me, of course, riding shotgun. His ears perked, a low, inquisitive whine escaping him. He knew something was off, his senses picking up the frantic energy of the city, the human fear that hung thick in the air. When we arrived, the street was a swirling inferno of flashing lights and acrid smoke. Gunfire erupted, a brutal symphony that clawed at my ears, ripping away the peaceful quiet of my ranger existence. It was a deadlock, a grim ballet of police and criminals with nowhere left to retreat. A high-speed, life-or-death chase was about to unfurl, and I was, inexplicably, right back in the thick of it. The story, the real story, actually began a month before that, shrouded in the darkness of a moonless night. I remember the feel of the tool, accelerator pedal under my boot, the roar of the engine as I slammed my vehicle through the gates of an abandoned factory. Metal shrieked against metal. Inside, another car, belonging to the robbers, was crumpled like a forgotten toy. Masked figures, heavily armed, stood guard, their eyes glinting in the faint industrial light. We'd received intel that this factory was being used by a robbery crew, and I, along with my old team, had been dispatched to corner them, to bring them down. My former partner, Carter, a man whose loyalty I'd tested in ways no one should, kicked open the car door, shouting, "Police!" The factory floor erupted into bedlam. These criminals, well, they were amateurs compared to us. My team was a finely tuned machine, honed by years of training and experience. Dealing with this disorganized bunch felt like a warm-up drill. Carter, with a baseball bat he'd inexplicably brought, chased one of them, his movements fluid, but then he lost his weapon, and for a heart-stopping moment, he was vulnerable. Just as he lunged to disarm the guy, there was a deafening crash. The wall behind the criminal imploded, pinning him beneath a cascade of concrete and twisted metal. It was me, behind the wheel of one of the factory's production trucks, driving it straight through the building. With the robber incapacitated, I delivered a swift, brutal blow, ending the skirmish. Together, we systematically cleared the factory. The mission was a success, a clean sweep, and for a brief moment, the old camaraderie, the almost familial bond of the task force, felt whole again. We celebrated at a dive bar that night, the clinking of glasses a dull echo of the gunfire from hours before. Carter brought his pregnant wife, her belly a beautiful, swelling promise of life, a stark contrast to the death we'd just dealt. Everyone talked about the baby, about the dreams they held for the future, about the simple joy of new beginnings. It was also Manu's birthday, another member of the team. He'd taken a nasty hit at the factory, a graze, but nothing serious. We clapped him on the back, teasing him that it was his first scar, a badge of honor in this brutal line of work. Every mission carried a risk, every day was a gamble, and coming out alive, even with a minor wound, was a blessing. In a quiet corner, away from the laughter and the clink of bottles, I met Mago. She was another officer, her intelligence as sharp as her wit, and the woman I'd been secretly in love with for months. Our conversations were hushed, intimate, a dangerous dance in the shadows. We were just beginning to lose ourselves in the moment when the flashing headlights of a car outside sliced through the darkness, pulling us back to a harsh reality. It was Red, an old veteran cop, a man with more connections than the internet. He was waiting for me, and he had a lead that would rip open the fragile peace I was trying to cultivate. Red's face was grim. He told me he had received information from an informant in the surveillance industry. The National Security Agency had planted a hidden camera outside Daily Private Bank. This wasn't just any bank, Red explained, his voice low and urgent. It was an exclusive financial institution, catering to billionaires from around the globe, a whispered haven for illicit wealth and money laundering. This kind of information, he warned, would attract the wolves. We needed to put Daily Bank under intense scrutiny. I returned to the party, but the festive air felt suddenly hollow. My face, I knew, must have been a mask of concern. The laughter, the easy camaraderie, it all felt distant, like a dream I was waking from. I retreated to a corner, nursing a drink, my mind already racing, dissecting Red's information, trying to anticipate the moves of an invisible enemy. Koda, who had been waiting patiently in my truck, greeted me with a soft nudge of his head when I finally got back. He seemed to sense the change in me, his usual playful energy replaced by a quiet vigilance as I sat in the darkened cabin, the phantom hum of the city still buzzing in my ears, pondering how to deal with the looming threat of Daily Bank. The wild, the mountains, my refuge, they felt further away than ever before. The next morning, I woke up in Carter's guest room. I'd been staying with him for a while, a temporary arrangement that had stretched into weeks. The house was usually bustling, but with his wife out, it was just us two. Over coffee, Carter looked at me, his eyes holding a depth I recognized from countless stakeouts. "So," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle, "how do you feel about last night?" He didn't mince words. He'd seen me with Mago, had pieced together our secret affair. Carter, with his keen insight, suspected I was doing it to spite Beck, Mago's husband, who also happened to be the precinct chief. Beck and I had a long-standing animosity, a rivalry that often verged on outright hostility. If our affair ever came to light, Carter warned, Beck would unleash a fury that would burn us all. I offered no explanation, no defense. What was there to say? The truth was complicated, messy, and buried under layers of duty, regret, and a dangerous, desperate kind of love. My only response was to tell Carter to get dressed. We had a job to do. Without another word, I started the engine and drove straight to Daily Private Bank. Inside, the opulence felt suffocating. I turned to Carter. "All right, if we were the ones planning a heist here, how would we do it?" Carter, a brilliant tactician despite his sometimes boisterous demeanor, began to dissect the bank's security. It was a joke. Surveillance cameras were for show, alarm systems easily bypassed. They relied on a private security firm, rent-a-cops, essentially. His assessment was chillingly simple. A quick smash and grab, 3 minutes max, and the robbers would be gone, disappearing into the city before anyone even knew what hit them. I found the bank manager, a smug man named Ganiga, and warned him. I told him his bank was a prime target, ripe for the taking. He merely scoffed, arrogant in his belief that their security was impregnable. Their branches, he boasted, spanned the globe, and not a single one had ever been successfully robbed. His dismissal was infuriating. Carter and I left the bank, the weight of ignored warnings heavy on my shoulders. As we rode the elevator back to the precinct, we bumped into Beck and Mago. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Beck, always looking for an angle, immediately challenged me about the factory raid. He criticized the reckless operation, citing the excessive damage and the cost of replacing bulletproof vests. His tone was dismissive, designed to undermine my authority. Back at the office, Beck gathered everyone, a self-important smirk on his face. He announced his promotion. He was the new chief of police, a reward, he claimed, for the successful factory raid. The audacity of it burned. He then launched into a tirade, questioning our tactics, demanding more technical measures and less brute force in future operations. It was all about public perception, he declared, about preventing cop versus criminal videos from going viral. He expected me to lead the task force in supporting his new vision, demanding that every future mission be approved by him. No one, he stated, was to act unilaterally. He was consolidating power, building his empire on the backs of our sweat and blood. Just as Beck was basking in his newfound authority, chaos erupted. A jewelry store downtown was being hit. The robbers smashed display cases, grabbing anything expensive they could lay their hands on. A woman, Natasha, cowered on the ground, terrified, hoping her compliance would save her. But as the thieves prepared to flee, one of them, without a moment's hesitation, pointed a gun at Natasha and fired, a cold-blooded execution. 3 minutes later, my team and I were on the scene. The store was a wreck, glittering shards of glass mixed with the stench of fear and gunpowder. But then I saw it, a strange symbol scrawled on a discarded tarp. It wasn't random. This was a deliberate clue, a signature. After cross-referencing old case files, we quickly narrowed our suspects to a criminal known as Adele. His record was extensive: bank robbery, violence. He'd been arrested before, but procedural errors had always led to his release. He was a phantom, operating on the fringes for years, untouchable. 10 years ago, I'd caught him myself, only for him to walk free due to a lack of witnesses. Adele had become my white whale, a bitter rival I'd chased across Europe, always a step behind. But Carter had a gut feeling. Adele had been quiet for a decade. Why resurface for a jewelry store? It felt too small, too insignificant. We both suspected this was just a prelude, a smokescreen for something far larger, a deeper conspiracy. To unearth the truth, I tracked down one of Adele's old associates, a low-level informant named Faye. We pressed him hard, and he eventually gave up a location. We put a round-the-clock surveillance detail on Faye's apartment. The long, silent hours stretched into a full night with no activity. The monotony in the surveillance van was broken by Manu. He cleared his throat, a nervous energy about him, and confessed he had feelings for Mago. The air in that cramped van immediately thickened, turning cold and brittle. I threw my task notebook down, the sudden movement rattling the vehicle, and stormed out, my face a thundercloud. Manu, flustered, quickly pivoted, asking Carter how long he'd been my partner. Carter, lost in thought for a moment, replied that it felt like forever since his first day on the force. But the truth was, our connection went back further than that. Carter's childhood was a rough one. His older brother, a man who spiraled into crime, had crossed a line. It was me, years ago, who had put an end to his brother's life. Carter didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. We simply returned to the silent vigil. As for me, I hadn't just left the surveillance van to clear my head. I walked to a dark sedan parked down the street. Mago had contacted me, slipping away from her duties to meet. We'd concocted a flimsy cover story about a separate stakeout. Those stolen moments with her were precious, a brief respite from the relentless pressure. We were laughing, caught in our own private world, when Carter's urgent voice crackled over the radio. "They're moving! AUP and his crew, they're on the move!" My blood immediately surged. No hesitation. I barked orders, leading the task force toward the house according to our pre-planned approach. We geared up, breaching the door and storming inside. The surprise raid sent everyone inside into a panic. My team moved with practiced precision, quickly subduing 2 of the robbers. But AUP, the cunning fox, was nowhere to be found. Just as I felt a wave of frustration wash over me, a car horn blared from outside. I spun around. AUP was already in a vehicle, speeding away, disappearing into the dense forest on the edge of town. I didn't waste a second. I leaped into my own car, radioing Carter, telling him to block the only escape route I knew AUP would take. The forest road was narrow, twisting, and the chase was pure adrenaline. AUP pushed his car harder, faster, attempting to outrun me. My frustration mounted with every passing second he gained. Then, like a miracle, Carter's surveillance van, a hulking beast, materialized from a side road, slamming into AUP's car, effectively cutting him off. It was a perfectly executed maneuver, a testament to Carter's quick thinking and unwavering loyalty. The mission, for the moment, was a success. Soon after, we were back at the precinct, the suspects in tow. As I walked past Beck's office, I deliberately paused, allowing him to see AUP, bruised and defeated, being led away. I wanted him to see what my team, what I, was capable of. The task force then began the grueling process of interrogating the suspects, late into the night, but they were all tight-lipped, sticking to the same story. They had nothing to do with the jewelry store robbery. I paired with Beck to interrogate AUP himself, the mastermind, or so we thought. He was slick, evasive, refusing to answer any questions, claiming we had no direct evidence. Hours passed, yielding nothing. Without concrete proof, we could only hold them for 24 hours. Beck, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. He accused me of acting unilaterally, of using excessive force in the raid. He gave me an ultimatum: find definitive evidence linking AUP to the robbery before morning, or protocol demanded we release them. I knew this was a rare opportunity, one I couldn't afford to lose. I immediately called Carter. Together we reviewed the jewelry store surveillance footage, searching for anything, any tiny detail we might have missed, and then we saw it. Before the robbery, Natasha, the victim, had been walking around the store, openly taking pictures of each piece of jewelry with her phone. Her death, too, was odd. The footage clearly showed she offered no resistance. There was no reason for the robbers to kill her, to risk drawing more attention. This was a setup, I realized, a calculated move. Something was hidden beneath the surface. I instantly began digging into Natasha's phone records, searching for clues. Mago joined us, her quiet intensity a welcome presence. After a meticulous forensic examination of Natasha's phone, we found it. Repeated calls to the same number in the days leading up to her death. Then, in a selfie Natasha had taken with her boyfriend, we saw it. A distinct tattoo behind the man's ear, a symbol, a unit insignia. It marked him as a former member of a mercenary outfit. My gut tightened. I cross-referenced the symbol with police databases, pulling up information on every member of that mercenary team. Soon, I had a name: Adele, the same criminal with a history of violent robbery, the one I'd been chasing for a decade. He was part of AUP's crew, yes, but all signs pointed to him being the actual killer in the jewelry store heist. The real mastermind might not be the one we'd just released. After a sleepless night, I presented my findings to Beck. My team had proven that the actual perpetrator of the jewelry store robbery was someone else. But without direct evidence to tie AUP to that specific crime, the precinct was forced to release him. Watching my nemesis walk free again, a cold unease settled in my stomach. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that there was a larger plot at play, a conspiracy brewing beneath the surface. But for now, without concrete proof, my hands were tied. A briefing was called to discuss the jewelry store robbery. Beck, with a patronizing air, introduced Adele's profile to the assembled officers. A dangerous thug, a mercenary with a long criminal record. His connection to Natasha, the victim, was complex. They were not just lovers, but accomplices. After the successful heist, Adele had brutally murdered his own girlfriend. The files showed he was a former mercenary, suggesting that this robbery crew was likely composed of other ex-military operatives. The jewelry store, Beck surmised, was merely a test, a reconnaissance mission. They were likely planning something bigger, another hit in a different area. After his presentation, Beck dropped the hammer. He announced that this case would be handed over to another team. He praised my unit's commendable performance, but then, with a dismissive wave, he condemned our unilateral actions, specifically the raid that led to AUP's capture and subsequent release. He framed it as police brutality, a serious infraction that demanded punishment. My new assignment: desk duty, pushing papers. Koda, curled at my feet in the office, sensed my frustration. His tail gave a few tentative thumps, then went still, mirroring my own internal turmoil. This bureaucratic sidelining, this forced inaction, felt like a deeper wound than any physical injury. It wasn't just about my dignity. It was about Mago, about Carter, about the city, all vulnerable while I was stuck in a swivel chair, watching the clock tick. The rage simmered, a slow burn beneath the surface. Just as Beck was basking in his newfound authority, smug in his belief that he had sidelined me, Adele, free from our custody, met with AUP. They didn't waste a second. Another jewelry store was hit, and Beck, still clutching to his narrative of control, immediately led a team to the scene. But something was off. Inside, the store was empty. No one. The robbers hadn't taken a single piece of jewelry. Instead, they had tied up all the employees, leaving them unharmed. And on the floor, deliberately left behind, was a crude smiley face symbol, a clear message. It dawned on Beck, a moment too late. This wasn't about jewelry. This was a diversion, a feint. Their real target was the Daily Private Bank, just blocks away. While Beck was chasing shadows, I hadn't been idle. From my desk, poring over Natasha's personal information, my team discovered she was an employee of Daily Bank, and she'd been fired just 10 days ago. We frantically tried to call the bank, but the lines were dead. Cut. My heart hammered against my ribs. I saw it then, the whole picture, clear as day. The jewelry store was a smokescreen, a brilliant distraction to pull our attention, to draw Beck and his men away. While we were chasing a ghost, they would hit the real prize. I didn't hesitate. I ordered one of my men to stay behind, to handle the paperwork that no one would ever see, and then I grabbed my gear. "Koda," I growled, "let's go." The dog, always attuned to my urgency, sprang to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Carter, Manu, let's move." My orders were sharp, devoid of any official sanction, but they understood. We were going. My intuition was proven right the moment we arrived at Daily Bank. The chaos, the sheer audacity of it, hit me like a physical blow. The robbers, heavily armed and meticulously coordinated, were already escorting hostages out of the main entrance. They barely acknowledged our presence, their eyes focused, cold. Under their overwhelming firepower, my team had no chance to retaliate. They even used a hostage as a human shield, rendering us impotent, unable to make a move without risking innocent lives. The helplessness was maddening. They retreated to their vehicles, quickly ditching the hostage and speeding away. I scrambled to my feet, firing shot after shot, yelling orders at my team to take shortcuts, to intercept them. One of the getaway vehicles got stuck in traffic, a momentary stroke of luck. Just as the robbers panicked, my team and I swarmed them. Cornered, they abandoned their car, scattering on foot into the crowded streets. The city erupted into a fierce firefight. For the sake of the civilians, we had to control our fire, maneuvering the robbers into a less populated area. They realized their collective action made them too obvious, so they split. 2 groups, 2 escape routes. I barked orders at Carter, sending him after one group, while I led Manu and the others to corner the remaining 3. They fired heavy weapons, retreating, but I stayed on them, a relentless shadow. Then they did it. They snatched a civilian, a desperate move, but they underestimated us. I fired, a clean shot, incapacitating the robber holding the hostage. "Manu, secure him! Don't let him out of your sight!" I yelled. Then without a moment's hesitation, I continued my pursuit. Meanwhile, Carter had cornered his suspect under a bridge. 3 meters separated them. The robber, facing Carter's drawn weapon, refused to surrender. Carter fired, certain he'd hit his target, but when he approached, all he found was a discarded mask. The criminal was already running, disappearing onto the main road. A motorcycle appeared out of nowhere, sweeping him away. As he passed, Carter caught a glimpse of his face. Adele. "Son of a bitch!" Carter roared, watching him vanish into the distance, powerless. I, along with Mago, chased my group into an underground parking garage. The silence inside was unnerving, broken only by our own hurried breathing. No one. We thought they'd given us the slip. Then, a sudden roar, an engine igniting. A car, fast and furious, sped directly towards me. It was a challenge, a provocation. I didn't flinch. I aimed for the windshield, squeezed the trigger. But it was too late. The car slammed into me, sending me flying, my body slamming against the concrete. Pain erupted, then darkness. I felt myself bleeding, consciousness fading. Mago, horrified, scooped up my fallen weapon. Rage, pure and unadulterated, contorted her face as she ran towards the car, emptying the clip into the fleeing vehicle. She jumped into a nearby squad car, determined to ram the bastard, but the gun was empty. She looked up, her eyes meeting the masked figure behind the wheel. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his arm, pointed, and fired. Mago crumpled. In that last agonizing moment, as my vision blurred and Mago's life drained from her, my eyes locked with the masked man. It was him. AUP, my bitter enemy, the ghost from my past, had returned to claim the ultimate price. The aftermath was a nightmare. The task force was shattered, the pursuit abandoned. We had lost. AUP and his crew had vanished, slipping through our fingers once more. I was severely wounded, my body a roadmap of pain, but Mago was gone, killed in action. Beck, fueled by a mixture of public pressure and his own venomous agenda, dissolved the task force, dismantling the entire anti-crime division. And me? The prosecutor's office issued an arrest warrant. Obstruction of justice, insubordination, and the tragic death of a colleague, all laid at my feet. It was a bitter, cruel irony. And then, Beck found Mago's phone. A string of intimate messages, a betrayal laid bare. My secret, our dangerous love, was out. Enraged, driven by a fury born of betrayal and grief, he threw me into a holding cell. He wrapped his jacket around his fist, and then, unleashing his brutal vengeance, he began to punch me, again and again. Each blow a testament to his rage, his heartbreak, his wounded pride. Koda somehow knew. He had been waiting outside the station, a silent, furry sentinel. When they took me away, he howled, a deep, mournful sound that tore through the sterile concrete walls, a sound that echoed the scream in my own heart. With the task force disbanded, the hunt for the criminals was officially called off. But Carter couldn't let it go. Twice we'd been within a hair's breadth of success, and twice they'd escaped. The weight of our failure, the injustice of Mago's death, pressed down on him. His wife, seeing his torment, gave him her unwavering support, quietly encouraging him to find the truth, to clear my name, to finish what we started. Carter decided to gamble everything. First, he reached out to Red, the veteran cop. Through Red's network of contacts, Carter found a black market doctor. The doctor, after some persuasion, confessed. An hour earlier, he'd treated a gunshot wound, a 9mm bullet to the shoulder. All the details matched Adele's description. Carter immediately showed the doctor Adele's picture. The doctor identified him. And then, the location? Adele was hiding in a nearby parking garage. Carter didn't hesitate. He drove there, adrenaline thrumming through his veins. Inside the garage, a hulking brute stood guard. Carter drew the baseball bat he always kept in his trunk. With a single powerful swing, the wooden bat shattered. But Carter, a trained task force member, was more than just brute force. He launched a flying kick, dropping the guard. Deeper inside, he found it, Adele's mask, along with other incriminating evidence. Just as he moved to collect it, Adele himself appeared behind him, throwing Carter's gun across the concrete floor. Carter feigned surrender, then lunged. A brutal, desperate brawl erupted. Adele, despite his shoulder wound, was a powerhouse, his size and strength giving him the advantage. Carter was outmatched, taking hit after hit, but the memory of Mago, the burning need for justice, fueled him, pushing him back to his feet. Adele lifted him, slammed him to the ground, then rained down blows, locking Carter's throat in a chokehold. As consciousness faded, Carter's eyes fell on a car jack. With his last ounce of strength, he crawled, just inches, and hit the switch. The car, rising on the jack, pinned Adele beneath its weight, just as Carter blacked out. When he came to, gasping for air, Carter didn't waste a second. He ignored Adele, who was now trapped and groaning, and quickly gathered all the evidence. That night, he marched into the precinct and laid it all on Beck's desk. Carter pleaded with Beck, urging him to set aside their personal animosity. In the face of such a grave threat, the department needed to unite. Only by bringing these criminals to justice could we truly avenge Mago. Beck, finally seeing the truth, reluctantly agreed to release me. In a tense, closed-door session, Beck and I finally pieced together AUP's true objective. During the previous bank robbery, they hadn't taken much cash, a detail that had baffled us. But Daily Bank held something far more valuable, $200 million in gold bullion. They hadn't touched it because breaking into the vault was too risky. The robbery was a diversion, a means to force the bank to transport the gold, making it vulnerable. I realized, with a sickening certainty, that AUP would strike tonight, during the transfer. My prediction proved chillingly accurate. AUP's crew had infiltrated the bank's security detail, seizing the gold transport truck and its contents. But they hadn't accounted for us. My team, battered but unbowed, materialized, blocking their escape route. This wasn't a small confrontation. We were heavily armed, prepared, and united. AUP, arrogant to the end, refused to surrender, leading his men in a desperate firefight. But our coordination, our precision, was unbreakable. After a brutal exchange of gunfire, most of AUP's men were down. The few who tried to flee were quickly subdued by Carter and his trusty baseball bat. Only AUP, the slippery bastard, managed to escape, disappearing into a dark, damp alley. I followed, my boots splashing through puddles, the metallic tang of blood and gunpowder heavy in the air. I kicked something accidentally, a clatter echoing through the narrow space. From the shadows behind me, AUP emerged. A trap. I spun, firing, but a bullet ripped into my chest. Then another and another. My body jolted, but I didn't fall. I held my ground, gripping my injured chest, the searing pain a distant hum compared to the white-hot rage that now fueled me. I took a step, then another, relentlessly closing the distance between us. AUP, caught off guard by my refusal to go down, barely had time to react before I tackled him, sending us both tumbling down a flight of concrete stairs. By then, most of the other officers were loading the remaining criminals into patrol cars. Beck, noticing AUP was still missing, led Carter down the dark alley. They found me, dragging a dazed, unresisting AUP out of the shadows. The truth was, we had all been wearing state-of-the-art ballistic vests. The bullets had hit, but they hadn't penetrated. I was bruised, battered, but alive. I tossed AUP, a defeated heap, onto the ground at Beck's feet. Then, I unzipped my bullet-ridden vest, shedding it like an old skin, and walked away with Carter. 10 years. 10 years of chasing that ghost. And finally, he was mine. The gold bullion, safe. The conspiracy thwarted. As Carter and I drove home, the weight of the world seemed to lift. We talked about his baby, about the future, about hope. The road ahead was long, but it was clear. I returned to my mountains, to the quiet life I loved. Koda met me at the cabin, his tail a frantic blur, his deep barks of joy echoing through the trees. He pressed against me, his warm body a balm to my bruised soul. We walked the trails again, the familiar rhythm of our steps a meditation. The city, the chaos, the pain, it all felt distant, like a bad dream. I was still a park ranger, but I was also a man who had faced his past, confronted his demons, and found redemption in the most unexpected places. The scars remained, physical and emotional, but they were now badges of survival, of a battle won. And with Koda by my side, under the vast, healing sky of West Virginia, I knew I wasn't alone. I had found my family, a kinship forged in fire and loyalty. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered. If you found strength in this story, if it resonated with the quiet warrior inside you, please consider giving this video a like and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. It helps these stories find their way. And remember, sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in the open, but within ourselves. Until next time, stay safe out there.